Dani, can you tell us about your journey into the world of art and history and what led you to become the executive director of Art and History Museums of Maitland?
Absolutely. I've always loved museums from a young age. I think that learning through play and creativity and exploration is really important. And so my journey began about 7 years ago. I started at the Art and History Museums of Maitland as the director of operations, caring for our historical facilities. And then I've been at the helm for 3 years now.
What's unique about Orange County's history and how is it preserved and presented in the museums that you oversee?
Sure. One of the things I think is interesting about Orange County and to some extent Florida as a whole is that it was settled by the United States much later than some other parts of the country. And so our history here, our United States history here is a lot more recent. It was really after the Civil War that people started coming down from the north en masse. And at that point, Florida had this kind of jungly, kind of almost hostile interior. And so they were settling in a lot of ways more like pioneers than, people coming down, from a relatively modern, lifestyle that they were enjoying before. So they kind of came down here, had to clear the land. And as a result, the cultural institutions that we enjoy today, they came much later as well. For our site, the Maitland Arts Center, it was built in 1937, and it was only the third gallery in the entire state of Florida. And it was the first gallery in the entire state that was dedicated to modern art. And so I think it's amazing that we have that here in Central Florida. And it was within probably 10 years after it being founded, more museums started showing up, but it was really a pioneer institution in a lot of ways.
Can you share some highlights and hidden gems within Orange County's historical museums that both locals and tourists should explore?
Absolutely. The Maitland Arts Center. It's the only National Historic Landmark in Orange County and the greater Orlando Tri-County area. And the National Historic Landmark designation is the highest designation a site can receive. It's given to sites of national significance. It includes sites like Lexington Battle Green, the USS Constitution, Hemingway House, and the Maitland Arts Center has that designation because of the architecture. It's a style called Mayan Revival. It was a subset of the Art Deco movement. It was never wildly popular. And today it's one of the few remaining examples of that style in the Southeast and one of the most intact in the entire nation. And where it differs from other Mayan Revival sites is a lot of the other sites, Frank Lloyd Wright did a few buildings in that style. The motifs, which are inspired by Mesoamerican iconography, they're, cast and poured and cast and poured. The Maitland Arts Center has over 2,500 hand-carved concrete sculptural pieces. This includes the Mayan Revival pieces, as well as Christian iconography, Buddhist iconography, and then just this fantasy imagery that's absolutely stunning. So the entire site is a living museum. It's a museum that's open to the public every Tuesday through Sunday. Every guest who visits the site and walks through the gardens is in a museum.
What are some of the significant artifacts or exhibits that tell a unique story about Orange County's history?
Yeah. So we have 4 museums, and each one tells a different slice of Orange County's history. The Maitland Arts Center tells the history of Andre Smith, who was really an arts pioneer at the time. Again, it was the third gallery in the entire state of Florida, the first dedicated to modern art. So he would fight these battles on behalf of modern art. And so that story is preserved there. In the Maitland History Museum, we tell the story of Maitland, one of the oldest municipalities in Central Florida, which at one point was the travel destination to come to in Florida. Presidents came to visit. A lot of notable people came to visit. In the Telephone Museum, we talk about the history of telephony, which is the story of technology and communication and connection. And then at the Waterhouse Museum, we really showcase how a middle-class family would have lived in the late 1800s. So there's a different piece of that story told in each of our locations.
How do the museums that you work with engage the community and promote volunteering or involvement?
Sure. We have a lot of free community events. It's really important to us to be welcoming in all members of the community to make sure everyone has access to what we do. So with our free family programming, we have free family day events. These are fun Saturday events where we open the gardens and have craft activities and scavenger hunts. We have Little Creatives and Me. These are toddler events where uh, young ones and their caregivers. They come and they sing songs in our gardens and do crafts and eat snacks. We have last Wednesday events. These are evening hours, mostly for adults, where guests can tour the exhibition with our chief curator, listen to an academic lecture, and then we have free open studio events where we just invite the public into our gardens, encourage them to bring a picnic basket, a blanket to sit on, listen to music, and then visit our artists that work in the studios. And then there's a lot of ways people can volunteer, and we rely on volunteers. So we love our volunteers. We have volunteers that work in our museums, that help with our education team, and that also help work in our gardens.
Is there an exhibit or project that you've worked on that holds special meaning to you?
Yeah, one I'm working on right now that's very special. We are working on a photo history of the Research Studio or the Maitland Art Center. And it is the first time, it's through Arcadia Publishing, it's the first time that some of Andre Smith, the site's founder's artwork, will be published and available for people to take home with them. And it'll be the first time that some color slides of the Research Studio during its golden era, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, will ever be seen by the public. So this book will be, we're working on it right now, and it'll be published in spring of 2024.
How do you think museums play a role in shaping the identity and culture of a community?
That's a great question. I think they both shape and reflect it. And shaping, I think the shaping happens at a young age. Cultural institutions provide access to the arts to kids who wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity, particularly through our school system. I think in a lot of ways, different families have different identities. You'll have your sporty family or your outdoors family or your arts family. And then sometimes you have your families that are just too busy. But I grew up with an outdoors family. So we were in scouting, would be out on the river a lot. But my access to the arts and my exposure to the arts came through the schools, and it came through school visits to the Orlando Museum of Arts, to the Orlando Shakespeare Theater. And I think without these institutions providing that access to kids who maybe wouldn't be exposed to it at a young age, it's really important. And then as they grow older and they join these institutions, then they start to reflect the community too. So there's a cyclical nature to that relationship.
All right, so I want to get our viewers ready for an activity that we're going to do. It's a challenge that's going to test your time traveling skills. So I'm going to show you a couple of images, and we're going to see if you can figure out what the location is. And if you do know it, just tell us a little bit about it, what you may know. And this is also an opportunity to see if our viewers can guess what this location is as well. All right, so the first one is...
So that is Fort Christmas. It's located in Christmas, Florida. It's a fort that was built during the Second Seminole War. When I was in elementary school, we took a lot of field trips to that fort. And so they have the fort itself as well as some cracker houses. The smell is what I remember most. I think it's creosote, or it's whatever they would treat the logs with. I may have that wrong, but it's a wonderful place to visit. And they do Pioneer Days, I believe, once a year too.
Yes, they do. They have some good events that they hold there as well. All right. Hopefully our viewers are able to guess that one. If not, you got to go check it out. All right, and here is the next one.
That is the Morse Museum. It's a beautiful cultural institution located in Winter Park. I don't know when it was founded. I do know that our site's founder, Andre Smith, would write these letters, these spicy letters to the Winter Park topics about the other museum's exhibitions. And he frequently referenced the Morse Museum. And sometimes he felt their work was true traditional. Sometimes he felt it was wonderful and modern. But today they have, I believe, the largest collection of Louis Comfort Tiffany's work.
All right, and here is the last one.
I don't know that institution.
All right, this is a trick one. This is actually from Orange County, Southern California. So if anyone guessed this, kudos for you. But we do have a old courthouse here in downtown Orlando that you could check out, and it's the Orange County History Museum. What upcoming exhibits and projects can people look forward to at the Art and History Museums of Maitland?
Sure. We just debuted a permanent history exhibition in our Maitland History Museum that will be changing out the artifacts periodically, but it's called Maitland's Attic. And it's kind of a cheeky reference to the way the museum has sometimes been viewed. Like, if you have a bunch of old stuff in your attic, bring it to the museum, which of course we're happy to look at your old objects and accession the ones that make sense, and preserve that history. But the new exhibition, we have over 200 objects in less than 1,000 square feet of space. So it's visually arresting. And it tells a story of Maitland through the people who were there. I think sometimes when you talk about history, you reduce it to facts and figures, and you forget that it's people just like us who went through this and shaped where we are today. And so it begins with the indigenous population of Florida and takes the historical narrative up through Maitland's growth as an atomic era bedroom community in the 50s.
Oh, that's so great. So people, if they find something in their attic or storage or whatever.
Yeah, museums get those requests all the time. So it's always best if you do have something that you want to donate to a museum, reach out to them, and they usually have a donation process that they'll go through. Our new exhibition too, it has a lot of hands-on artifacts, which when you go to museums, usually you can't, play with the artifacts, but we have an entire room dedicated to things that people can touch and play with and handle.
How can viewers get involved or support the mission of preserving and promoting Orange County's rich history?
Become members at these cultural institutions. That's probably the best way. Most museums and cultural institutions, they have affordable membership. And when you become a member, you're showing your support for the institution. You're getting on their mailing lists, both for post and email. You're going to hear about what they're doing, and you're going to constantly learn about how you can participate.
What's your personal favorite piece of Orange County's history and why?
It's the Maitland Art Center. Yeah, so the Historic Research Studio, it's the only site like it in the nation. It's one man's kind of dream vision. He built it when he was a little bit older. He had lost a leg as a result of an injury in basic training in World War I when he was 44 years old. And up until that, he had lived a pretty traditional and conservative life. And he was sick for about a year. When he finally got better, he writes about it as having rose from the dead, and things he never dared to do, he now did. And that's when he came down to Florida, and he built this amazing site that is a reference to these fantasy landscapes he had started painting when he had gotten better. So you're really entering this kind of fantasy world that the artist has invited us to join him in.
How can viewers stay connected with the museums and keep up with the latest events and happenings?
Well, they can become a member, and they'll be on all of the email lists, so they'll learn about it. They can go to our website. It's artandhistory.org, and they can also follow us on our social media, which Maitland.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about the museums and the history, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe to our channel and follow our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts.